now. All right, so I'm going to start the welcome to your strike training, and I'm going to share my screen so that you can um, see what I see basically. And I'm just going to walk through the vision of this training is like a total intro training. So for some of y'all, some of this material might already be familiar. But the vision is to go through to sort of onboard new participants. So wherever you are, if you're already on strike, if you're strike adjacent, if you're strike curious. And what we're going to do, and I'm going to try to fit this into a shorter amount of time, since we got started a little late today, is to go through the culture, story, strategy, and structure of the movement so that you get a sense of sort of like the DNA of what we're doing here. And then everybody feels like they can find a place to plug in and get involved. So let's see, community agreements. So one way that I think we can talk about the culture of a movement or of an organization is just through the kinds of agreements that we want to set in our meetings and that I want to set for us for today. And so some of those are, to focus on solidarity and mutual aid. We've especially seen since COVID this focus on supporting each other in really basic aspects of life, like making sure that everyone has food and housing and medical care. And so those are things we also want to do as part of this movement, is make sure that we're taking care of each other at lots of different levels. Another aspect that I think is important is anti-oppression. So bringing a lens of like that this is a movement, the primary demand of our movement is a cost of living adjustment, which is material, it's money. But what we're trying to address are all different systems of oppression, including capitalism, but also racism, sexism, homophobia, ableism, all of these different things that intersect to make it hard for certain people who don't have like independent family wealth to be grad students and to produce knowledge and to participate in what counts as knowledge in our society. So I think that's one of our core values. I think another core value that's part of the culture of the movement is democratic participation. So we want this to be a movement where everyone can have a voice and can get involved. And that's especially what I'm going to be focusing on at the end, is thinking about how you can get plugged into structures so that you can also begin to kind of participate and contribute your voice and your perspectives on things. And then another aspect that I think is important always is respect and consent. We already did kind of go rounds and talk about our pronouns. That's one way of making the space more respectful to people to determine their own gender expression and have that be respected by others. And another thing that I've been thinking a lot about, I've been prompted to think about that by the COLA campaign at UC Berkeley, which is has an access needs working group, is just to think about bringing access needs always into our conversations and recognizing that everybody has different needs in order to be able to fully participate. And so access needs could be just a piece of information that you want to share with people in a meeting or in a conversation, like, I'm a parent and I may need to hop off to do childcare, or I have back pain, so I may need to like do a handstand in the middle of our meeting. And it can also be requests, right? So I do a lot of work around violence, gender-based violence, sexual violence. So requests might be related to trauma, right? Like, please don't use descriptions of sexual violence or police violence in our conversation. So I want to invite folks here today, if you have any access needs that you want to share, you're welcome to speak them out. You're also welcome to send them to me like in the chat box. And we can try to make sure that we accommodate those. We also, when we have folks sign up for Strike University events, we have them write down if they have access needs. So we have the option, for instance, of doing like transcriptions, if people need that, etc. So I invite y'all to offer anything in the chat if you have it. I don't see anything right now, so I'll keep moving. And then always in discussion, just kind of creating a discussion space where people feel able to be heard and able to be respected, and also for like productive disagreement. So a couple of things that I always use in my classroom also is the step up, step back principle. So if you've been speaking a lot, maybe take a step back. And if you haven't said anything, challenge yourself to step forward. To speak from the I, to avoid generalizations. I work a lot in transformative justice, so alternatives to police and prison. So I think a lot about accountability. And the principle that I really like here is the oops, ouch principle, which is sort of a way of cultivating accountability at the micro level in our everyday lives. And that's the idea that whenever we interact with each other, everyone has the right to say, ouch, that wasn't cool. I didn't like what you said. That was harmful or hurtful. And everybody has the ability, and I would say the responsibility, to step up and say like, oops, I apologize. That was not my intention. I'm sorry for causing that harm, and I won't do that again. And in general, just generative listening. I feel like there's a lot of, as we move into a phase of the COLA movement where we're kind of in new terrain and reassessing our strategies, we need to listen deeply to all the differences that each of us are experiencing in our different departments, on our different campuses, based on our different experiences of COVID, which may have a lot to do with our own like privilege or oppressions that we're facing. So I just want to encourage that. Are there any questions about this? This is trying to just tap into the way we like to work with each other in the COLA movement. Feel free to just like shout it out or drop it in the chat box. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep moving then. Oops, come back. There we go. Sorry, y'all, you will learn that I am not, oops, I just clicked on the link that I didn't want to click on. Y'all, if you haven't noticed already, you will figure out that I am not very technologically savvy. Okay, so what is our story? What is our current political moment, and why did we feel the need to do this intervention? COLA stands for Cost of Living Adjustment. We know that many University of California grad students, as well as undergrads, basically rent keeps going up every year, especially for the UCs that are in like coastal California. Our wages are not keeping pace with that. Our union, United Auto Workers 2865, negotiated a 3% salary increase for us in 2018, and that does not cover the rising costs of living for us, particularly in the Bay Area with Silicon Valley, but I'm sure for each of you, you've faced this. And, you know, we know that nationally, there's just in general stagnating wages, not just in our sector, but in all kinds of sectors. And so what we're fighting for is a cost of living adjustment that is proportional on each campus to the housing market on that campus. And what we want to do is to bring grads out of rent burden. Rent burden is defined as paying 30% or more of your monthly take-home salary on rent, according to HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And we want to do that without raising tuition or fees, without cutting grad admissions, without retaliation. We really believe, you know, the UC is always telling us, oh, we don't have money for that. We don't believe that. Like, the UC's always found ways to fund its initiatives that it deems important. We also know that the regents make really exorbitant salaries, and that Janet Napolitano has also even been like investigated for some of her mismanagement of money. So we know that the money is there. And for each different campus, it's calculated differently. One of the highest is Berkeley, and I'm curious, I don't know if y'all know actually the COLA that you're demanding on your campus. Please drop it into the chat box. That would be interesting for me. But what we're demanding at Berkeley is $2,103 increased per grad student per month for 12 months to bring us out of rent burden. And our political moment is also bigger than this thing, right? So this isn't just about a salary increase. It's about a recognition from the university that grad students are central to the whole way that the university functions, and that essentially we are like essential laborers at the university. We carry an enormous amount of the teaching burden on the campuses. And part of this is just recognizing and valuing that labor. And the sort of when we zoom out and see the bigger issue, what we see is in general, like the privatization of higher education, creating a lot more precarious short-term working contracts, not just among grad students, also with adjuncts. And we also see that like these lower wages and the stagnating wages that I was talking about earlier have led to definitely a housing crisis and homelessness in California. Food insecurity, we know that really significant numbers of our undergrads and grads are food insecure on different campuses. And that's part of why some of the actions that COLA campaigns have taken on different campuses is to like reclaim campus cafeterias and make them free and make the food free and available to all students. I also saw something, I haven't looked into it, but I saw something posted on UCI for COLA's Twitter account yesterday that a student like broke into the food pantry because it wasn't open, and then they were arrested. So this is literally the point we're coming to, where people are being criminalized for meeting their own basic needs as students and as grad student workers. We also know in this moment of pandemic that there's like a larger health crisis going on. And another really core issue for the COLA campaign is militarized policing on campus. As higher education has become privatized, we've seen kind of the doors of higher education that were like briefly flung open through great social movement struggle on the parts of marginalized people to allow those people to have access to higher education and to be part of the production of knowledge and saying like what counts as knowledge. We're seeing all of that be kind of like closed back up, and campuses become more and more like privatized spaces where certain people are treated as disposable and are not welcome. And we know in our society, the people that are experiencing policing and imprisonment at the highest rates are people of color, particularly Latinx and Black people, right? So that's also happening on our campus. And what we're calling for as a movement is like a vision that would solve all of these things, right? So economic security, unionized labor, public education for all, no more student debt. That's part of the vision of Strike University, is that we're really like a free, public, like people's university. We want to understand housing as a human right, that everyone has the right to nutritious and affordable food, universal healthcare, Medicare for all, and really a vision of moving beyond systems of punishment towards a vision of like abolishing systems of punishment and moving towards transformative justice. So that's the bigger picture that's on the table for us. Are there any questions or comments about this? I just want to make space for your thoughts here. No? All right, we will keep rolling. Cool. There we go. Now we're back in full screen. So how did we get here? Some of you guys have been tracking this already. Carolyn, you mentioned that, you know, really this was kicked off by UC Santa Cruz in the fall of last year, where they began a wildcat grading strike. Berkeley started its COLA campaign in December of that year. A lot of other campuses are also started to ramp up their COLA movements around that time. And Santa Cruz has still been sort of at the forefront of the movement. So they escalated to a full work stoppage in February. And then at the end of February, after multiple threats from their chancellor and from the head of the UC Regents, Janet Napolitano, who, by the way, if you didn't know, was former head of Homeland Security under Obama and responsible for deporting millions of undocumented people out of the United States. I have no idea why this person is qualified to work in education. But this person threatened grad students, fired about 80 grad students from UCSC, and lots of other people in response to those firings had pledged to not take the jobs that those people were fired from. And so Santa Cruz is right now in a bit of a employment crisis because they've essentially laid off, as far as I've understood, 10% of its grad student workforce. So we're seeing escalation at Santa Cruz. And what happened in response to that was other campuses stepping up and saying an injury to one is an injury to all. We cannot have a campus situation where people can be fired for fighting for what they need to live, right? To have safe homes and food and to survive. So Santa Barbara, Davis, and San Diego all joined the Wildcat strike. Berkeley joined in mid-March, right, like as the lockdown was happening. And UC Irvine just started their strike like 2 weeks ago. So we're kind of in this moment. We're also in the moment of Corona and trying to reassess like how we got here and how our conditions have changed and how our movement needs to change in the face of Corona. And I think one of the responses that I mentioned before was moving towards more of a coordinated intercampus level. So we now have, not only does every campus have its own general assemblies, we also have an intercampus general assembly on Fridays. But I wanted to ask if anyone would be willing to share here their own COLA story, in the sense of like what attracted them to the COLA movement, and if people want to share like their own struggles as a grad student. I think we all know that being a grad student is sort of it's not a living wage. So if anybody on the call feels comfortable, like I said, I'm happy to also press pause on recording if folks, want to speak privately. Would anybody be down to share a little bit about like how they've gotten involved in COLA or what it means to them personally?
I can share a little bit. So I'm an undergrad, so I'm not like, what is it? Yeah, like I'm not a grad student, but as like an undergrad, I do see, or I saw like the position of like privilege that I had in this movement, because like what is it, like I'm the one like getting taught by grad students and TAs, and like I really wanted to be a part of showing the school like that undergrads aren't okay with like how like the grad students are getting treated, or getting like, or even how like grad students are getting fired for just fighting for like what they need. And I really wanted to show like my support, and that like I wouldn't like stand for it or like accept like grades or anything like that. It just like, yeah, try to show support as an undergrad.
Thanks for sharing that. I think undergrad support is really important to understand. A lot of people want to pit the grad student strikers against undergrads, because as if like we're, ruining their education or taking their grades away. And strikers have been really intentional about any undergrad who needs a grade can get one. That's no problem. And I think understanding that we're really struggling around a lot of the same issues, actually. And focusing on like the real problem is the administration. Zane, did you want to chip in anything about like what brought you to COLA, or?
Can we pause the recording though?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me do that. Hang on, I'm gonna also pause share so that I can, okay, yeah, here. So thanks everybody for sharing those stories. I feel like this is one of the more like diverse trainings I've had in terms of people coming with staff perspective, grad student perspective, undergrad perspective. And I appreciate that this like helps us knit together how so many of the experiences we're having at different points in the institution are similar and similarly like problematic and messed up. So I want to talk a little bit about like how we're going to win. So we've talked about all the things that are fucked up that we want to change. And I want to talk a little bit about like how we're going to change all of these things and what the COLA strategy is. So right now our COLA strategy is a wildcat strike, which you've probably seen the logo of the wildcat. And a wildcat strike is a labor action that workers take on their own rather than one organized by their union. I'll talk a little bit later about the relationship between the wildcat and the union, but we also know that historically a lot of strikes have been initiated before the union bureaucracy was ready to vote on them. And so you have a kind of militant radical rank and file out in front that's sort of pushing the union to like catch up and agree to do a formal strike. And that's sort of similar to the situation we find ourselves in now. In terms of our strikes effective, I feel like we've been having kind of like a cultural renaissance of the strike. And now we're talking about red strikes and birth strikes and sex strikes and like all these different kinds of ways of striking. But traditionally, you know, the strike is the vision that our power is our power to withhold labor and to refuse to cooperate in systems that are harming us and that are unjust. And if you look at historically, like all of the things that we appreciate about our working conditions and many other things as well, like having safety precautions in our workplaces or having a minimum wage, having a weekend, having laws that say that children aren't allowed to labor, all of those things were won through strikes. And strikes involve risky action. They involve high risk, high sacrifice action. But our power to protect ourselves is our collective worker power. That's kind of our safety net for being able to take this leap together. And that's why taking action in a coordinated way is so important. Because the university can't fire all of us. They can't get rid of all of us. So we want to stand together. And I think that's why a lot of us felt kind of called, especially after the Santa Cruz workers were punished, because like we can't allow them to break us apart, either like by campus or by ideology, whatever strategy they're going to use to try to divide and conquer. So our UC-wide plan of action is to spread the strike, to hold strong on the digital picket, to get creative about how to create a picket since we don't have a physical picket. We also want to force Santa Cruz to reinstate fired grad workers and force the UC to promise no retaliation for these labor actions that people are taking. And the biggest strategy that we're focused on right now is moving our union towards a legalized unfair labor practice strike. And that legalized strike would mean that we are, whereas a wildcat strike, you can be disciplined and punished. Sorry, that was like a little Foucault there, disciplined and punished. You can be disciplined and fired. On a wildcat strike, that is the risk that we're taking. When we have a legalized strike, that is not allowed. So we have the protection and we have the back of the union. We also have the union strike fund. And you know, the bigger vision of that is really to force UCOP, which is our chancellor's bosses, that's the regents, that's Janet Napolitano, force them to the bargaining table, and also at the same time pressure state government in Sacramento to fund COLA. So we know that California is like the 6th largest economy in the world. The University of California is the biggest employer in California. It's also in all likelihood the biggest landlord, and it's definitely like acting like a shitty for-profit, in some cases slumlord for some university housing. So we know that the UC can afford this, and we just need to kind of bring them to the table and make them negotiate with us. And someone earlier mentioned rent strike. I think that's another great way that people have been expanding the scope of conflict. Since COVID, you know, our housing conditions have become our working conditions. So it makes a lot of sense to be demanding not only a COLA, but also going on rent strike until we get it, especially those who live in university housing. So that's the bigger picture. The campus picture is, what does that look like on your campus, right? So that means going on strike and doing the digital picket. I'll talk a little bit more about this. This could be full work stoppage. This could be withholding grades. This could also be this sort of hybrid form that Berkeley started and Santa Barbara has taken up called the social welfare strike. I'll get into that in a second. And there's a link here for the How to Strike guide. The other major thing we need to do right now is we need to build our base. Right? So we need to pull in people who are like, strike, I don't know about that, never heard of that. We need to like not preach to the choir, but like reach the folks that we see and have the most contact with, which are mostly our department, right? And so we're organizing both towards a wildcat strike and towards this official unfair labor practice strike. And I know that actively we're seeking pledges to get people to agree to go on an unfair labor practice strike. And we're hoping to hit it. We're hoping to get 5,000 pledges, which would be 2/3 of the union, because the union wants this to be a majoritarian high participation action so that we can show that we have like credible threats, that there's really a lot of force behind this. And I think currently we have I want to say 3,000 or more, maybe 3,500 pledges. So we're really pushing people to phone bank folks in their department, talk to them about the strike, and get them to sign the pledge. And on Strike University, we have a recorded phone bank training. Someone on this call mentioned that they've been working on the Bernie campaign, so they've probably been doing a lot of phone banking already. I can say that everyone I know hates phone banking until they do it. So that's part of why we made the training, is just to get people over that hump of like, oh my God, I hate calling strangers, I hate texting strangers. But that's our major strategy right now in this moment. And then solidarity organizing. So undergrad, faculty solidarity, and again, Strike University creating this bigger space for us to learn and grow and network with each other. So I recommend checking out some of the other things that are happening there. And then I want to just say a little bit about the social welfare strike, which is some people were saying, especially in times of COVID, it feels not great to completely withhold labor, largely because grad students very much care about their undergrads, and they know that Corona has created a lot of turmoil in the lives of undergrads, particularly like first-gen students, students who themselves are immune compromised or have families that are immune compromised, or just don't have healthcare or don't have access to healthcare. So some people have said, you know, instead of work stoppage, so a full work stoppage, some people are doing that. I think that's great. Labor looks different in each department. It's going to look different if you're working in a lab versus if you're, you know, teaching Arabic. So you want to find consistency at your department level. That's why organizing at the department level helps kind of build solidarity and create a common experience so that everyone can be on the same page about what they're striking, how they're striking. So some people have just been not holding sections, and other people have been doing the social welfare strike where they hold sections, maybe not at the same time as their official sections are supposed to be. And what they do is they check in with their students about how they're doing. So they basically enact mutual aid, and they also inform them and educate them about COLA. And in doing that, they kind of connect the experiences that undergrads are having right now with these bigger struggles, as we've been doing throughout this training. And another option that we have that you can access on Strike University is called Strike Syllabus. And Eugene and Thomas from UCSD have been leading that. And what they do is they give 10 to 15 minutes of material about COLA. They have a PowerPoint, and you can use that in your classes that you're teaching. So, and then withholding grades, people have interpreted this also in different ways. Some people are still grading their students' work. They're just not submitting their grades. Other people are not grading, but they're providing feedback on their students' work so that there's still a relationship there. And other people are doing neither, which is also totally fine. So we encourage people to figure that out for themselves in their department and commit to that. So what I want to do, I'm going to pause the recording now to give us some time to talk about, we already talked about why we're here today and shared some of our stories, but talk about like what excites us about this plan, what are our fears and concerns, where do we feel able to take action. So let me pause recording and recording. Okay, thanks everybody for sharing. There's a couple of things here about risk and different concerns. No one had big concerns on our call, so I'm going to kind of skip over these, but I will share the slides with you when we're finished. And the last thing I wanted to plug people into is to ask everybody to think about how they might get more involved in COLA on their campus. And like each campus looks a little bit different, but the core structure at most campuses is that there's a general assembly that happens weekly. And then there are various working groups. I gave some examples here: finance, mutual aid. I know at UCI they had like their first week of striking, they had a really wonderfully successful donation table where people could come and offer donations to people who are dealing with stuff related to COVID. So that's again another, we were talking earlier about social movement unionism and using a social movement to really exercise solidarity and have the backs of like all the people on your team, in the sense of not just the people who are in your union, but all of the like the people who are being marginalized by the system that you want to be in solidarity with. So there's definitely ways to get plugged in to other like movement work through mutual aid, political education, arts and communications, etc. And we now have a structure with, like I mentioned, not just a campus General Assembly, but a intercampus General Assembly, which is on Fridays at, I think, 11 a.m. And a lot of groups are using Signal, so they're using chat, or they're using Mattermost or Slack. And I know that some campuses also have undergraduate and faculty solidarity organizing. But anyone is welcome to join any of these working groups. So I wanted folks to think about an action that they could commit to taking this week that would help them get more plugged in with the union and like find a place where their like talents or skills could be of service and of use. And then I'm gonna, I'll pause the recording so we can all share those commitments that we wanna make. And then I'm gonna follow up with y'all and share the slides. And I'm happy to be a resource for you as you try to figure out like how to get plugged in and what's the right place for you. And we also have a link here at the end of the slideshow there's a map on Strike University that has every campus and their website, their social media, etc. So you can kind of find your campus if you haven't done that already.